Hello and welcome back to Sound of History, or welcome for the first time if you're a new listener. This episode is a bit late. I am aiming to publish a new episode like every second week, so every 14th day. And I am hoping that I will keep that going. But sometimes, things get in the way and I wasn't able to finish this episode on time. And also for everyone out there listening, I am trying to do this podcast somewhat chronologically with the episodes. So I'm starting way back in the end of the 1800s, and then I'm going to work my way forward. So if you are a new listener, I can recommend also that you listen to some previous episodes, so you are like following this timeline that I'm trying to paint here. When I'm doing research for this podcast and I come across some old biography or memoir, how much of it can I actually expect to be true? Like, how many % of the book will be absolutely, completely accurate? And how much of it will be like overly romanticized? Maybe shameful parts or stories have been hidden, and maybe some details or events have been embellished to make the person seem way more interesting and fascinating than they actually are. And what if the person that the biography is about is dead and the book has been written post-mortem without their permission? I'm sure there's been plenty of dead bodies rolling over in their graves. There have been some biography scandals in recent history where it turned out that the book was not true at all and that everything or most of it was made up. You have, for example, the book Fragments written by Benjamin Wilkomirski in 1995. He wrote a memoir about the Holocaust where he described his memories as a Jewish child surviving the concentration camps. And the book earned widespread critical admiration and it won several awards. It sold well, it became really popular and many people bought the book. And Wilkomirski became a minor literary celebrity and he was appearing on 60 Minutes, the BBC and in the New Yorker. But then a Swiss journalist started to question if the events in the book were actually real and was able to find out that the author was not a Jewish Holocaust survivor at all, but in fact a Swiss man, and his real name was Bruno Dösseker. And another book fraud was Fragments from 2003, written by James Frey. He wrote a memoir about his life with addiction and how he was able to turn his chaotic, destructive life around. And it received raving reviews. It became the #1 paperback nonfiction book on Amazon, and it topped the New York Times bestseller list for 15 straight weeks. And Oprah Winfrey picked it as a selection for her book club. But also here it was later revealed that the book was fabricated or contained highly exaggerated events. And Oprah Winfrey famously confronted Frey on live television after the truth came out. So, when you read a biography about someone who lived 100 years ago, how much can you trust the author who has written it? Is it a ghostwriter, an old friend, or family member? And does it make any difference? But enough about that. I want to tell you a story about Alma Schindler. She might be more or less forgotten today, but back then she was definitely in the center of attention in Central Europe. See what I did there? She was the hottest thing on two legs, a total babe. A woman who got easily bored and just wanted to have some fun, completely impulsive with little or no thought about her actions and their consequences. And she was so captivating and fabulous and gorgeous that all men that met her fell madly in love and lust. Alma Schindler was born in Vienna in 1879. Her father was a well-known landscape painter, and she grew up in a creative cultural home. Her dad surrounded her with artists, musicians, and thinkers. Her mother was an elegant and ambitious woman, and she ensured that her daughter Alma was raised to not just observe beauty, but also to embody it. From a young age, Alma was precocious, enchanting, and musically gifted. And when she was 13, her father passed away, and after her father's death, Alma focused on playing the piano, and she composed her first songs when she was still a teenager. And after a few years, Alma's mother remarried with the painter Carl Moll, and through her new stepdad, she met the ever so popular and timeless artist Gustav Klimt. I don't think I have to tell you guys who Gustav Klimt is. I'm sure most of you are well familiar with his works. He painted those somewhat abstract, somewhat Art Nouveau-y, unique, timeless paintings, lots of detail and gold and patterns. I think one of his most famous paintings is called The Kiss, when they are like draped in that golden patterned blanket. Anyway, in the glittering salons and at the fancy dinner parties of the late 1800s Vienna, Alma was more than just a presence, she was a force. Since she was born into a finely cultured household, she was no stranger to intellect and artistic brilliance, and she moved effortlessly through the city's most refined social circles, where composers, writers, painters, and philosophers gathered to debate, perform, and to seduce. She was known for her striking beauty, which earned her a reputation as the most enchanting woman in all of Vienna. And she was equally admired for her sharp intellect, her quick wit, and her undeniable musical talent. As a socialite, she didn't just merely attend events, she also helped shape them, and her presence at dinners, soirees, and musical gatherings elevated their status. She was both a muse and a magnet for genius, and in such an exclusive environment, it was almost inevitable that many of the era's most celebrated men would be drawn to her. And not just because of her beauty, but because she had a unique charm. She was the complete package, a woman who was deeply connected to art, ideas, and the excitement and drama of her time. So one of the first men to fall for her was, of course, Gustav Klimt, and although they became infatuated with each other, their affair apparently never progressed beyond passionate kisses. Klimt is among the first men to have painted Alma. He painted her when she was around 17 years old, although the portrait was later lost. She studied composition with composer and conductor Alexander Zemlinsky, and they had a secret, passionate relationship. But Alma struggled between physical passion and revulsion for Zemlinsky, and she teased him about what she thought were his ugly features, saying that she could easily have 10 others to replace him. She also made comments like that if she was to marry Zemlinsky, that would mean that she would bring, quote unquote, short, degenerate Jew children into the world. And as the relationship became more and more strained, Zemlinsky grew tired of her antics and he started to see her less and less. Alma made these sorts of light-hearted anti-Semitic comments throughout her life, even though she was together with several Jewish men. I guess she was a product of the society she was brought up in when Nazi ideas had started to spread through Europe. And I mean, this is like 30, 40 years before Hitler had yet come to power. And her stepfather, the painter Karl Moll, was an early supporter of the Nazis, and I guess her mother was most likely a Nazi as well. And they both committed suicide when Soviet forces approached Vienna at the end of the Second World War. So this physical, passionate, secret relationship that she had with Zemlinsky wasn't enough for Alma. She wanted more. She wanted greatness. While still in a relationship with Zemlinsky, she started an affair with the famous composer Gustav Mahler. She was in her early 20s and he was nearly twice her age. And around a month later, Mahler and Alma were secretly engaged, and 2 more months after that, they were married. Alma was already pregnant with their first daughter. So who was Gustav Mahler then? Well, only one of the most popular conductors and composers of the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was one of the most emotionally intense and philosophically rich composers, and he kind of stood at the crossroads between Romanticism and Modernism, and he was blending huge orchestral forces with intimate emotion and deep existential themes. That was an excerpt from Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 1, second movement. Hello, are you one of those people that enjoys listening to my podcast? Well, then I want to ask you for a favor. You can really help me out by recommending, liking, following, subscribing, commenting on this podcast. It would really, really mean a lot, and I would so much appreciate your help. Now back to the episode. Gustav Mahler was born into a Jewish family in what is now the Czech Republic, but he later converted to Catholicism, partly to further his career in anti-Semitic Vienna. And he was not just a composer, he was the conductor of the Vienna Court Opera, a titan of the musical world. Intense, prickly, revered. And his music often explored themes like love, death, nature, spirituality, and the meaning of life, and sometimes all together in the same piece. When Alma and Gustav met, sparks didn't fly. They crashed. Quite opposite personalities. He was known for his obsessive perfectionism, his ascetic routines, and his long walks in the woods where melodies would come to him. And she was bubbly, social, and brimming with the need to create. She wanted to live in color and not to serve someone else's artistic vision. Yet something drew them together. It was not comfort, and it was definitely not calm, but the sheer gravitational pull of intellect, music, and ambition. Friends of the couple were surprised by the marriage and questioned their love. People couldn't understand why such a good-looking girl from a good family would choose to be with a depraved Jew. And on the other hand, Mahler's family were suspicious of Alma. They considered her to be too flirtatious, unreliable, and too fond of seeing young men fall for her charms. And Mahler was by nature moody and authoritarian. His earlier partner had said that living with him was like, quote-unquote, being on a boat that is ceaselessly rocked to and fro by the waves. When Mahler proposed to Alma, he wrote her a letter with a condition that broke her heart before she even had the chance to try on her wedding dress. Hey babe, you know you're great and all, and I really love you, but you must give up composing. There cannot be two composers in one household. Love you, XOXO Gustav. And with that letter, Gustav Mahler proclaimed his worldview, that the brilliance of one could eclipse the other, and he was not the one that was going to step out of the spotlight. Alma was stunned and hurt, and was confused about what she should do. She could either keep her music, or she could have Mahler. And in the end, she chose to be with him. Gustav's composition, the Adagietto, is perhaps the most famous piece associated with Alma. It is often considered a musical love letter expressing Mahler's deep love for her, and Alma herself believed that this piece was written as a declaration of love. Its lush lyrical strings evoke a sense of intimacy and romantic longing. Pay close attention to the slow, aching beauty of the Adagietto, as it reveals Mahler's profound love for Alma, despite their stormy and tumultuous relationship. That was a slightly shortened version of the Adagietto performed by the Peabody Symphony Orchestra. Their marriage was passionate and painfully uneven. Alma became Gustav's copyist, his editor, his advisor. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes on his compositions, correcting scores, suggesting ideas, transcribing endless drafts. Her musical mind was indispensable to him, but her own voice was fading away. And Alma soon became resentful because Mahler's insistence that there could only be one composer in the family and that she had given up her music studies to accommodate him. She gave birth to a second daughter, and they now had Maria and Anna. And in 1907, their daughter Maria died of scarlet fever. Alma became severely depressed after her daughter's death, and perhaps the combination of grief and creative frustration led her to begin an affair with the young German architect Walter Gropius, who founded the legendary Bauhaus School of Design. When Mahler found out about the affair, he was completely devastated and became anxious that she would leave him. And in a rare and humbling act, Mahler sought help from none other than Sigmund Freud. And Freud suggested that Alma had been psychologically murdered by being denied her creative voice. So, in an effort to win back his wife's affection, Gustav now encouraged her to compose, and he even edited and arranged for the publication of her 5 songs in 1910. But it may have been too little too late, and her affair with Gropius continued, and Gustav, who had been diagnosed with a heart problem, died the year after in 1911 at 50 years old, and Alma became widowed at 31. That was Gustav Mahler's Symphony Number 2, fifth movement, and it was performed by the DuPage Symphony Orchestra. Only 14 of Alma's compositions have survived till today. Although they were never dated, they are assumed to be early songs. And after Mahler's death, Alma didn't return to composing, nor did she discuss any other works that she may have written, and she claimed to have lost the will to create anything new, having been sucked dry from living and working with such a demanding and neurotic genius. After Gustav's death, during a 4-year period, she had another passionate, stormy affair with the artist Oskar Kokoschka, and she became his muse, and he created works inspired by her and their relationship. But Kokoschka became too possessive, which made Alma distance herself, and the emotional ups and downs of the relationship tired them both. During World War I, Kokoschka enlisted in the army, and Alma silently carried on with her life without Kokoschka, and resumed contact with Walter Gropius. When Alma finally dumped Kokoschka, he became so heartbroken and he had such a hard time to get over her that he commissioned an avant-garde doll maker to make a full-sized, anatomically accurate doll of Alma, constructed to his detailed specifications. Yeah, that seems like a totally healthy and normal way to get over a breakup. For months, Kokoschka provided very detailed sketches and written instructions to the doll maker, insisting that the doll be lifelike enough to fool the senses, and that it was supposed to be fully functional in every way a real human body would be. Whatever that might mean. And the result was a life-sized doll with swan skin exterior and horsehair details. He then dressed it in custom-made underwear and clothing, and he is said to have taken it to cafes, and he took it with him to the opera, and he made several portraits of it. And finally, during a wild party, he smashed a bottle of wine over the doll's head and decapitated it. Alma and Gropius then married in 1915, and they had a daughter together. And a couple of years later, she became pregnant again and gave birth to a son. And Gropius thought that the child was his, but Alma had been having an affair with the writer Mahler-Werfel, and the child was apparently his. So Alma and Gropius agreed to a divorce, and in the meantime, the baby, who had been born prematurely, died at only 10 months. Then she and Werfel began to openly live together after her divorce from Gropius. However, she postponed marrying Werfel until 1929, after which she took the name Alma Mahler-Werfel. In 1938, as the shadow of fascism was creeping across Europe and Hitler's troops marched into Austria, Alma and Franz, who was Jewish, found themselves in sudden and immediate danger. And with their names on the Nazi watch lists and their world crumbling around them, they fled to France. And then they lived in France for about 2 years, but soon it wasn't safe there either, because in 1940, Nazi forces invaded France. So they were desperate and on the run, and the couple fled on foot across the Pyrenees into Spain. And then from Spain, Alma and Franz traveled to Portugal. And from Portugal, they boarded a ship that would take them to New York. And eventually, after having arrived in the US, they settled in Los Angeles, where Alma continued her role as a socialite and hostess, throwing parties and bringing together artists and networking. And her husband, Werfel, died of a heart attack in California in 1945. In 1946, Alma Mahler-Werfel became a US citizen, and a few years later she moved to New York, where she had purchased a small house on the Upper East Side, and she lived there by herself on the 3rd floor, and she used one apartment as a living room and the second as a bedroom. Alma Mahler-Werfel outlived her first husband by more than 50 years, during which time she was the primary authority on all matters regarding the deceased composer. She was the expert and could live to tell about his values, character, and day-to-day behavior. And how suitable do you think she was for such a role? If you die, would you like an ex-boyfriend or ex-wife that you had an awful relationship with to tell your life story? She wrote 2 books about her relationship with Gustav Mahler, which quickly became the central source material for Mahler scholars and classical music lovers. And unfortunately, as academic research further investigated the picture she painted of Mahler and their marriage, some writers found her accounts to be unreliable, false, and misleading, and discovered evidence of deliberate manipulation and falsification. But even though Alma Mahler's stories are full of flaws and questionable details, they've still had a huge impact, because for generations, academics, musicians, and fans have relied on them. Her version of events helped shape how people understood Gustav Mahler and became a major part of the literature about him. And this lasting influence, despite it being problematic, has become known as the quote-unquote Alma Problem. The Alma Problem takes shape in several different ways. To begin with, there is her suspicious treatment of the couple's correspondence. Of the more than 350 letters that Gustav Mahler is known to have written to her, Alma hid almost 200 of them, and of the 159 that she did choose to publish, she is now known to have made alterations to no fewer than 122 letters. And on 3 occasions, Alma even crafted fake letters by joining together separate letters. And she also appears to have systematically destroyed everything that she wrote to her husband. And the text of only a single one of her own letters, written before they were even married, is known to exist. So when Alma Mahler-Werfel chose to edit Gustav's letters before publishing them, she wasn't just tidying things up, she was crafting a narrative. And a pattern quickly emerges. She wanted to appear as both the brilliant muse at the center of his world and the long-suffering innocent victim of his coldness and control. For example, she cut out mentions of gifts that Mahler gave her so she could claim that he was stingy, and she removed references to the money he gave her, reinforcing the image that he kept her financially dependent. And she even erased mentions of people close to him whom she disliked, downplaying their importance to make herself seem more central to his life. In some more subtler edits, she changed the tone of his words. So, for example, when Gustav Mahler wrote, "Please answer if you're able to follow me," Alma switched it to "if you are willing to follow me." It's a small tweak, but it shifts the whole meaning. Instead of politely asking a question, it instead becomes a demand. So what Alma was doing was not editing, it was storytelling, carefully curated to shape how the world would remember her and Mahler. The problem is that many of Alma's claims are about private experiences that clearly don't have any other written or recorded evidence, nor is there any balancing material from the other side of the marriage. For, in contrast to Alma, Gustav Mahler never wrote or spoke, except perhaps to Freud, about their relationship. And the popular cultural perception of Gustav Mahler as the typical late romantic composer, an ascetic, a moody and tormented neurotic, a despairing and sickly man from whom all pleasures were suspect, and a man whose constant overwork undermined an already weak physical body, derives entirely from Alma's writings and is not corroborated by anyone else. And as a side note, for most of his adult life, in fact, Gustav Mahler took great pleasure in being physically active. He loved to swim long distances, climb mountains, take endless walks, and go on long bicycle rides. And I think the lesson we've all learned here is that when you die, maybe don't let the cheating ex-wife or ex-husband be in charge of writing your memoir. That was all I had to share for this episode. I will be back again in 2 weeks or so, give or take a few days, or maybe right on time on the 14th day, we will see. But now I'm saying goodbye, and until next time.